Imagine for a moment living a full, vibrant life.
Okay.
You spend 12 grueling but beautiful years raising a bright young son. You fight side by side with the woman you love, scraping together a family and a future in a world that constantly tries to tear you apart.
Right, a real struggle for survival.
Exactly. And the memories are entirely tactile, like the smell of the humid air in the tunnels, the calluses on her hand, the specific pitch of your child's laugh echoing off stone walls.
Yeah?
And then in one violently abrupt instant, you wake up. You open your eyes to the cold dark, and you realize that those 12 years, that family, every single sacrifice you made,
It was all fake.
it was all a hallucination. It was this desperate, elaborate fortress your own mind built to protect you from unimaginable, nonstop physical torture.
It is just a staggering psychological concept.
Yeah.
I mean, the horror of that moment isn't just the physical agony you are waking up to. It is the immediate crushing weight of the morning. The grief for a life, a lover, and a child that never actually existed, outside the synapses of your own fractured brain.
And that mind-bending premise is the beating heart of today's deep dive. We are jumping into a highly requested mission today.
Oh, yeah.
We're providing an exclusive reader's guide and quality review of one specific pivotal section, that's Chapter 19, titled Guide, from D.P. Kirk's 2017 dark fantasy novel, San Vitae, The Awakening.
It's incredibly rich text to analyze from a literary perspective.
It really is.
By isolating this one chapter and looking at its mechanics, we get a front-row seat to how a writer successfully constructs profound psychological trauma on the page without alienating the reader.
And we know exactly who we are doing this for today. You are someone who loves a good aha moment. You want multiple perspectives. You want to gain thorough knowledge of the underlying mechanics of a story. And you absolutely despise info overload.
Nobody likes info overload.
Yeah. Right. So our mission is to extract the narrative brilliance of this chapter. We'll use the broader context of the book to understand exactly why this specific moment is an absolute masterclass in psychological storytelling.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's unpack this. We all know the broader context of the Santerrie Wars and the brutal reality of the New Covenant. We know what they do to Vitae users.
Yeah, it's grim.
But to understand Chapter 19, we need to look specifically at the mechanics of what happens to a Sanite mind inside one of those Covenant vaults.
Right, because we aren't just talking about standard interrogation here.
No.
We are talking about 12 years strapped inside a mechanized Iron Maiden with needles constantly piercing Kurien's body to drain his pitch-pure vitae.
It's just nonstop.
Exactly. And from a psychological standpoint, the human brain, or in this case, the highly resilient Sanite brain, it has a finite capacity for processing pain before it physically cannot sustain consciousness in that reality.
It just breaks.
It induces a dissociative fugue state. To survive the unending extraction of his vitae, Kurien's consciousness essentially severed its connection to his physical nerve endings and retreated inward.
Wow.
It constructed a seamless, alternate reality where he was the bonded conscript of Myasuchi, raising their half-breed son, Hon.
I've always thought about it like when a high-performance computer system is overheating.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. The system sensors realize it's about to physically melt down, so it forcefully shuts down all the main resource-heavy processes, goes completely dark on the main monitor, and just runs a low-energy safe mode simulation in the background just to keep the core drive intact.
Yeah, survival mechanism.
Kurien's brain built a safe room. But from a storytelling perspective, I have to admit, reading through the chapters leading up to this point left me slightly frustrated at first.
Really? Why is that?
Well, Kirk writes this hallucination as if it is complete objective reality. There are no blurry edges or wobbly screen transitions like you see in movies. How does an author sustain that illusion without making the reader feel cheated once the rug is pulled out?
What's fascinating here is that D.P. Kirk deliberately weaponizes the narrative perspective. Instead of giving us an omniscient bird's-eye view, the prose anchors us entirely within Kurien's limited, fractured viewpoint.
Okay.
The author is playing with the concept of cognitive dissonance. When Kurien believes he is fleeing through a war-torn city with his son, the prose treats it as empirical fact, because to Kurien's sensory processing centers, it is empirical fact.
So we only see what he sees.
Exactly. The brilliance lies in the breadcrumbs. Kirk doesn't give us a neat little roadmap showing what's real and what isn't, but he seeds the narrative with impossibilities.
Like what?
Like logical gaps in the hallucination that Kurien's traumatized mind paves over. but that the careful reader can spot.
Oh, right. And that buildup of impossibilities creates this suffocating sense of dramatic tension. You start to realize the structural integrity of the safe room is failing.
Yes, the walls are cracking.
Which brings us right into the visceral opening of chapter 19, where that collapse goes from a slow leak to a catastrophic implosion.
It's quite the opening.
We start right in the middle of a chaotic action sequence. Kurien, his hallucinated lover Myasuchi, and his hallucinated son Han are fleeing a New Covenant missile strike in a crumbling underground tunnel.
Dust, smoke, chaos.
Exactly. The deafening sound of imploding stone. And Kurien is carrying Myasuchi's twin sister, Rikuko, who is severely injured. On the surface, it just reads like a high-octane war sequence.
It absolutely does, but the mechanics of the scene are incredibly layered. Think about the sensory input of a missile strike, the sheer volume, the kinetic force.
Right?
The hallucination is trying to process the violent physical reality of Kurien finally being ripped out of the vault in the real world. Yeah, it's translating that real-world extraction into a dream-world missile strike. And amidst that roaring chaos, Kirk weaves in a deeply eerie detail. The half-conscious Rikuko starts mumbling cryptic poetry.
Oh, man, yeah. She whispers, the untended blossoms' petals covered in tears of dew lie in wait for the night of reckoning to bloom.
Which is such a weird thing to say during a missile strike.
Which is such a wild tonal shift. I mean, you have concussive blasts tearing the ceiling down, and she is whispering about blossoms and morning dew. It almost feels like a glitch in the software of his dream.
That's exactly what it is. It's the subconscious bleeding through the fraying edges of the hallucination.
A glitch?
Yeah. The poetic imagery, the soft, fragile blossoms waiting for a night of reckoning, that is the suppressed, rational part of Kurien's mind, desperately trying to signal to the dreaming consciousness that the illusion is ending.
So his own brain is trying to wake him up.
Right. The brain uses poetry and metaphor because the direct truth that none of this is real and you've been tortured for a decade is still too traumatic to face directly.
That makes a lot of sense.
The Night of Reckoning isn't a military attack. It's the impending, terrifying return to objective reality.
That makes perfect sense, especially when you look at how the environment immediately starts decaying around them. Right after the poetry, Kurien guides them down into this hidden, ancient hospital hallway.
The hospital scene is so tense.
And what lights the hallway? It's not Santerrie magic. It's Vitae illumination. That's the exact technology of the New Covenant zealots who are currently torturing him in reality.
And the lights keep violently flickering.
Yeah. Kurien actually describes the darkness between the flickering lights as a sinister, living entity trying to consume them.
The environmental storytelling there is superb. The Vitae lights represent the intrusive reality of the Covenant vault breaking through.
Like it's leaking in.
Yes. Every time the light flickers, it's a pulse of actual reality attempting to overwrite the hallucinated hospital hallway. Kurien's desperate goal in this scene is to find an ancient antivitae, a godlike original Vitae user hidden in the hospital.
He's looking for a savior.
His mind is inventing a literal deus ex machina, a god in the machine, hoping this ancient being can somehow validate his existence and, more importantly, save his son.
And that brings up the primary tension of the entire chapter for me. He's pushing his body to the absolute limit, fighting through this claustrophobic nightmare landscape specifically to protect Han.
Right.
But as a reader analyzing the text, by the time we hit chapter 19, we are deeply suspicious that Han is a phantom. Myasuchi is a phantom.
We know something is very wrong.
So if the reader suspects the stakes are fake, how does the author handle that massive dramatic irony without stripping Kurien of his agency, or worse, making him look foolish? I mean, usually dramatic irony works because we know the killer is hiding in the closet and the character doesn't.
Exactly.
Here, we suspect the character's entire motivation is a lie.
It's a remarkably difficult balance to strike. And Kirk achieves it by shifting the focus from objective reality to emotional truth.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, it genuinely does not matter if the physical form of Han is an illusion. What matters is the crushing intensity of Kurien's devotion. Kirk centers the narrative tight on Kurien's internal state, the terror in his chest, the desperate need to shield his child.
So his feelings are real, even if the kid isn't.
Precisely. Even if the objects of his love are crafted by a traumatized mind, the capacity for that love is entirely real. By making the emotional stakes undeniably authentic, Kirk forces the reader to empathize with the psychological struggle rather than sitting back and judging the delusion.
You really feel that devotion, which makes the mechanism of the climax absolutely devastating. The structural collapse of his mind finally happens.
Brutal.
Kurien sets the injured Rikuko down on a hospital rack. He is tenderly adjusting her bandages, acting as the protector, and then without any warning, she writhes in pure agony. Right there in his arms, her flesh begins to disintegrate from a heatless, invisible flame.
Notice the specific physical laws Kirk breaks there.
The heatless flame.
Yeah, a heatless flame reducing a physical body to ash. It defies the established physics of the Santerrie world. It is the final, undeniable system failure.
The safe room is burning down.
Exactly. The rational mind has finally overpowered the simulation, and it uses the imagery of spontaneous, heatless combustion to visually represent the evaporation of the lie.
I kept asking myself during that scene, why ash? Why not just have the characters fade away like ghosts, or shatter like glass?
Ash is visceral.
It's so tactile. Before Kurien can even process Rikuko burning, it triggers a cascade failure. He turns and he sees Myasuchi and Little Han collapse to the floor. They hit the ground and instantly erupt into a fine, ashen particulate.
Just dust.
In a matter of seconds, his entire family dissolves, and the ash is literally slipping through his fingers. It's dirty, it coats his hands, it gets in his lungs. It's a horrifying permanence.
That tactile nature is crucial. Ash is the physical remnant of something that has been entirely consumed. It represents absolute finality. You can't put ash back together.
No, you can't.
By having them turn to ash, the author physicalizes how trauma victims often feel their seemingly stable lives disintegrating around them. The heatless aspect is key, too. There is no external fire, no enemy to fight in that moment.
Hal can't punch his way out of this.
Right. The destruction is coming from the inside out. It is the ultimate waking nightmare.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the text explicitly links the physical collapse of the hallucination with his physical posture in the dream. As he watches his son turn to dust, Kurien falls backwards, slipping away from the ash.
He's literally falling out of the drain.
Yes. And in that moment of falling, the transition between realities occurs. He hears a psychic scream in his head, a woman's voice calling his name. And when his back actually hits the ground, the impact doesn't happen in the DVD-lit hospital hallway.
No, the impact happens in objective reality. The transition is jarring, instantaneous, and brutal.
He hits the floor, and he wakes up in a dark, freezing cavern. And he's lying next to an unfamiliar woman named Sharina, who has a partially shaved head and is covered in these tattoos that pulse with a dim lavender luminescence.
A completely different setting.
Completely different. The 12 years in the Iron Maiden actually happened. The high-octane escape he just experienced in the tunnel was his mind finally processing the fact that someone, presumably Sharina, just physically broke him out of the vault.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the novel, this precise moment in Chapter 19 is the true awakening that the book's title, San Vitae, The Awakening, references.
Oh, wow, of course.
It is not the triumphant, anime-style awakening of latent magical power that readers of the genre might expect. It is the agonizing, traumatic birth into his actual reality.
He has to face the music.
He has to look around this freezing cavern, look at this glowing stranger, and accept a crushing truth. He has to accept that the real Myasuchi, the woman he loved before his capture, might be long dead in the Santerrie Wars, and that the son he spent over a decade nurturing and protecting never existed at all.
I want you to really put yourself in that cavern for a second. We've all had the experience of waking up from a dream that was so incredibly vivid, so emotionally fulfilling, that when you opened your eyes and stared at your actual ceiling, you felt a genuine, hollow sense of loss.
Yeah, that lingering sadness.
You mourned a life you never had for a few minutes before the day started. Now take that fleeting feeling and multiply it by 12 years. 12 years of deep foundational memories. Inside jokes, arguments, the pride of watching a child walk. Instantly erased.
It's an almost incomprehensible psychological burden to place on a protagonist, and it radically shifts the entire narrative thrust of the novel.
It totally changes the stakes.
From this chapter forward, Kurien isn't just fighting a physical war against the New Covenant. He is fighting a bitter, entrenched insurgency against his own fractured mind and his longing for the safe room.
Which makes this the perfect pivot to the review portion of our deep dive. As a reader's guide, looking at Chapter 19 in the context of the larger book, how do we evaluate the literary quality of what Kirk pulled off here? Because writing a hallucination that takes up a significant portion of a book is incredibly risky.
It is a massive risk. From a critical standpoint, Chapter 19 is a masterclass in subverting the unreliable narrator trope.
Subverting it. How?
Very often in genre fiction, writers use extended hallucinations or dreams as a cheap plot twist to artificially manufacture shock. The classic "it was all a dream" cop-out that leaves readers feeling like their time was wasted.
I hate that trope.
Everyone does. But Kirk avoids that pitfall entirely because the hallucination isn't a trick. It is a profound exploration of complex trauma. The illusion had real stakes for Kurien's psychological survival. The quality of the execution lies in the respect Kirk shows for the psychological weight of dissociation.
I completely agree. And for anyone listening who is thinking, okay, this sounds like a deeply heavy, standard, dark fantasy story about vampires and magic, you need to know about the genre-bending pivot that Kirk initiates right after this chapter.
Oh, this is the best part.
Because San Vitae, the Awakening refuses to stay in that post-apocalyptic fantasy lane. As you read past chapter 19 and Kurien interacts with Sharina, the book starts weaving in these incredibly unique, hard sci-fi elements that completely upend the world building.
It really does. The narrative aggressively expands its scope in a way that forces the reader to constantly reevaluate the rules of the universe.
We get hit with some wild concepts.
We are suddenly introduced to things like the Tokyo Alternate Space Cooperative. We move from discussions of magical vitae to alternate dimensions, timeline manipulation, and bizarre overlapping shared memories.
That was the part that absolutely hooked me. Kurien starts having these intense bleed-over memories with Sharina, the tattooed woman he woke up next to.
Yes, psychic link.
And through these fractured glimpses, you realize Sharina might actually be a woman named Hiki or someone named Lotus existing in a completely different, high-tech, cybernetic Tokyo timeline.
It's so cool.
It seamlessly transitions from a dark fantasy survival story into a mind-bending sci-fi multiverse mystery. It is such a compelling reason to be excited to read the rest of the book because you realize the canvas is infinitely larger than you thought.
And importantly, it works because the book demands active reading. Kirk doesn't hold your hand and explain the timeline shifts with exposition dumps.
No spoon-feeding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He forces the reader to experience Kurien's psychological whiplash firsthand. You, as the reader, are put in the exact same position as the protagonist. You have to sift through the data, piece together the fragments of reality, and figure out how these alternate spaces connect to the trauma of the vault. It respects your intelligence.
So what does this all mean? When we step back and look at the architecture of Chapter 19 of San Vitae, we see a profound, unflinching look at the extreme lengths the human consciousness will go to in order to survive.
Survival at any cost.
Kurien's mind, faced with the absolute darkest depths of technological cruelty in that Covenant vault, didn't build a fortress of rage or violence to protect his sanity. It built a fortress of love.
It constructed a family.
It was a beautiful, desperate lie designed to act as a buffer against a reality of unending torture.
This raises an important question, one that fundamentally challenges how we perceive the events of the novel moving forward.
What's that?
If trauma can force the mind to build an entire, tangible reality that lasts for over a decade, and if our memories can bleed into alternate dimensions, as seen later with Sharina and Lotus, is an illusion born of pure love any less real than a physical world born of pure violence?
Wow.
Think about it.
Yeah.
If Kurien's traumatized mind was capable of generating a flawless, decade-long reality that felt entirely indistinguishable from waking life, complete with its own physical laws and deep emotional bonds, what does that mean for the reality he actually woke up to in that freezing cavern?
You mean, how do we know he's actually awake?
Right. How can he or you, as the reader, ever truly prove that the awakening itself isn't just a secondary, infinitely more complex layer of the simulation designed by the new covenant to keep a fractured mind docile and compliant?
That is a terrifying thought. If the brain can fake 12 years of a son's life, it can certainly fake a glowing woman in a cave. That is exactly the kind of ontological paranoia that stays with you long after you turn the last page. Thank you for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive into the fractured world of San Vitae. Keep questioning the boundaries of the stories you read, and more importantly, keep questioning the structural integrity of your own realities. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.